The worst day of my life began with the smell of fresh coffee. That smell had always meant hope to me. It meant another busy morning, another chance to save money for my own cafe someday, another step toward the future Claire and I used to dream about together. By noon, it smelled like goodbye. The front door burst open so hard it slammed against the wall. Oliver hurried inside, breathing fast. His face had lost all its color. Everyone stopped for a minute. The room froze. Cups stayed half-filled. Customers looked around in confusion. Even the espresso machine suddenly sounded too loud. Oliver rubbed both hands over his face before speaking again. The investors are gone. Nobody answered. They emptied every account. The business, it's over. A spoon slipped from someone's hand and hit the floor. Nobody bent down to pick it up. Oliver swallowed hard. I tried calling everyone. Lawyers, banks, nobody knows where they are. His voice cracked. I can't pay anyone. The words landed like bricks. Months of overtime. Years of early mornings. Every extra shift. Every dollar I had invested in the employee ownership program. Gone. I stood behind the counter with a coffee cup still in my hand. It slowly slipped from my fingers. The cup shattered across the floor. I barely heard it. This has to be a mistake. No one answered me. Oliver stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder. I wish it was. His eyes filled with guilt. You deserved better than this. Around me, coworkers quietly packed their lockers. Some cried. Others stared into space as if waiting for someone to wake them from a nightmare. I didn't move. My future had disappeared before lunch. An hour later, I carried a cardboard box through the parking lot. Inside were a few coffee mugs, my apron, framed customer thank you notes, and the notebook where I had sketched ideas for my own cafe. The notebook suddenly felt heavier than everything else. Rain began falling before I reached my car. Perfect. Even the sky seemed tired. Claire answered on the fourth call. Hey. Relief rushed through me. Can we meet tonight? A pause. I'm busy. I really need you. Another pause. What happened? The cafe is gone. Silence. The investors disappeared. We all lost everything. A slow breath reached my ear. I'm sorry. Those two words sounded strangely empty. I'll explain later. Fine. The line ended. No, are you okay? No, I'm coming. Just silence. I stared at the black phone screen for several seconds. Something inside me already knew tonight wouldn't go the way I hoped. The restaurant was one we used to love. Small, quiet, warm lights hanging from the ceiling. Tonight, everything felt cold. Claire arrived 10 minutes late. She wore the gray coat I bought her last winter. She smiled politely before sitting down. Not warmly, politely. You ordered already? I waited. Oh. She placed her phone beside her plate. It lit up every few minutes. Each time, her eyes dropped to it. So, I forced a smile. It really happened. She nodded. I figured. My savings disappeared too. I'm sorry. Again, the same careful words. No emotion behind them. The waiter brought our food. Neither of us touched it. Steam rose from the plates until it slowly disappeared. So what now? I'll find another job. She tapped one finger against her glass. In this economy, I have experience. Experience doesn't guarantee anything. The sentence hung between us. I searched her face. Normally, she reached across the table when I struggled. Tonight, both of her hands stayed folded in her lap. I'll get through this. I'm sure you'll try. Try. Not succeed. Not together. Just try. Another message appeared on her phone. She read it almost immediately. My stomach turned. Claire, can you look at me? Her eyes finally lifted. There wasn't anger. There wasn't sadness. Only distance. I need to know you're still with me. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she released a long breath. Ethan, my heart began sinking before she finished. I've been thinking for weeks. Weeks. I didn't know how to tell you. The restaurant suddenly felt too small. I want stability. We were building that. That single word hurt more than shouting ever could. I can't spend years wondering if everything will fall apart. It already did. I know. That's exactly when I need you. She pressed her lips together. I don't think I'm strong enough. I leaned back in my chair, not because I wanted to, because my body suddenly felt too heavy. So this is it? Tears gathered in her eyes, but never fell. I think it has to be. The food stayed untouched. Neither of us noticed when it became cold. Back at our apartment, she quietly walked into the bedroom. Closet doors opened. Suitcases appeared. Hangers clicked one after another. I stood in the hallway listening. Every sound erased another piece of the life we had built. You planned this. Her hands stopped folding clothes. I didn't plan today, but you planned leaving. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. She zipped the suitcase. The sound echoed through the apartment. At the front door, she reached into her purse. The apartment key rested in her palm. She stared at it for several seconds before placing it in my hand. I hope someday. The sentence never finished. Neither did ours. The hallway felt strangely quiet after the elevator doors closed. I remained there long after the lights turned off automatically. The key dug into my hand. I never loosened my grip. That night I sent one message. Did we really end like this? No reply. An hour later. Nothing. Before sleeping, I checked again. Unread. Morning came. Still unread. By the second evening, I stopped pretending she simply hadn't seen it. She chose not to. That truth hurt more than the breakup itself. I placed the apartment key on the kitchen table. Across from it sat two untouched coffee mugs. One belonged to me. The other belonged to someone who no longer lived here. My phone buzzed. For one hopeful second, I smiled. Claire. Finally. Instead, it was a social media notification. Someone had tagged her in a photo. My thumb hesitated before opening it. The world seemed to stop breathing. Claire stood beside a well-dressed man outside an expensive rooftop restaurant. She wasn't forcing a smile. She looked genuinely happy. The post had been uploaded only minutes ago. The date beneath it hit even harder. 2 days after she walked out of my life. My phone slowly slipped onto the table. The unread message I had sent her stayed on the screen. Under it, the picture remained frozen. She had already stepped into a new future. I was still standing in the ruins of the old one. The picture stayed on my phone long after I wanted it gone. Claire stood beside another man with a smile I hadn't seen in months. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe. The lies I told myself sounded weaker every minute. I locked the phone and tossed it onto the couch. It landed beside the notebook that held my dream cafe. One future had disappeared. The other suddenly felt impossible. For the next 3 weeks, every morning looked exactly the same. Wake up, search job listings, send applications. Wait, nothing. The apartment became painfully quiet. Claire's favorite mug still sat in the cabinet because I couldn't bring myself to move it. Her sweater still hung behind the bedroom door. One afternoon, I grabbed it without thinking. The familiar perfume almost knocked the air out of me. I folded it carefully, placed it inside a box, and pushed the lid closed. Some memories deserved a place. Not a home. My phone buzzed again. A friend had sent another picture. Claire. Ryan. A company party. I didn't even open it this time. The notification disappeared after one swipe. That evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. Oliver stood outside carrying 2 paper cups. I figured you could still use coffee. A tired smile slipped onto my face. You still know me? I always will. We sat on the balcony while the city lights slowly came alive. Neither of us spoke for a while. You blame yourself. His voice was calm. I lost everything. So did I. You'll recover. He laughed softly. Ethan, I'm 60. That sentence carried more weight than he intended. I spent 30 years building that cafe. His fingers tightened around the paper cup. It's gone. The wind pushed across the balcony. Oliver stared into the distance. You know what scares me the most? I shook my head. Starting over. I feel the same. He turned toward me. No. His eyes held mine. You feel like your life ended. Another pause. But it didn't. I stayed quiet. Losing everything gives you something strange. What? He smiled. Nothing left to fear. The words settled inside me. You can't lose what you don't have anymore. He stood and brushed dust from his jacket. Build something that belongs to you. What if I fail? You already did. He grinned. And somehow you're still breathing. For the first time in weeks, a laugh escaped me. Small. Real. Before leaving, Oliver placed an old brass key on the table. Storage unit. I frowned. What's inside? Coffee machines. My eyes widened. The old ones, they still work. You kept them? I had a feeling someone would need them. He winked. I know exactly who. The key stayed in my hand long after he left. That night I opened my notebook again. Instead of reading old plans, I started drawing new ones. Smaller, simpler, possible. The next morning my phone rang. Maya speaking. Her cheerful voice caught me off guard. I heard about everything. News travels fast. It does. A short pause. So, are you planning to sit around feeling miserable forever? I laughed. That's one option. It's the boring option. What do you suggest? Meet me. Where? I'll show you. An hour later, Maya stood outside an old brick building with peeling blue paint. The windows were dusty. The sign above the entrance had faded years ago. What do you think? It needs help. It needs coffee. I blinked. She smiled wider. The owner owes my uncle a favor. You know the owner? I know everyone. She pushed the old door open. Dust floated through the sunlight. Broken shelves lined one wall. The floor creaked beneath every step. It isn't much. No. But it could be. She nodded. I've been saving money. I turned toward her. For what? My own bakery. Our eyes met. What if we stopped dreaming separately? The idea sounded completely insane, which was probably why my heart started beating faster. I don't have much left. I know. I can't promise success. I know. I don't even know where to begin. She folded her arms. Cleaning. That earned another laugh. We spent the rest of the afternoon sweeping floors and carrying out broken furniture. Hours passed without either of us noticing. Music played through Maya's phone. At one point, she accidentally splashed white paint across my shirt. Her hand flew over her mouth. Oh no! I stared down for 2 seconds, then dipped my paintbrush into the bucket. A blue streak landed across her apron. Her eyes grew wide. You didn't. I absolutely did. She grabbed another brush. The next 5 minutes looked less like renovation and more like a paint war. By sunset, both of us were covered from head to toe. The building still looked unfinished. But somehow, it already felt alive. Days became weeks. Fresh paint covered cracked walls. Old tables found new life after sanding and polishing. Oliver brought the coffee machines exactly as promised. One evening he walked through the doorway and stopped. You actually did it. Not yet. He smiled proudly. You're closer than you think. When everything was finally ready, Maya placed a small wooden sign above the counter. Carter and Brooks Café. Seeing my name there almost made me forget every bad day behind me. Almost. The first customer arrived the following morning. An elderly woman stepped inside with careful steps. It smells wonderful. My hands trembled while preparing her coffee. Every movement felt important. Steam rose into the morning light. I placed the cup gently in front of her. There you go. She took one sip, closed her eyes, then smiled. This reminds me of the cafe my husband used to take me to. A lump formed in my throat. Thank you. She left a generous tip before walking out. After the door closed, I stared at the empty cup. Not because of the money, because someone believed in something I had created. Maya leaned against the counter. Told you. I smiled. You did. Business stayed slow during the first few hours. I didn't mind. Every customer felt like proof that my story wasn't over. Late that afternoon, I carried a box toward the storage room. My phone vibrated inside my pocket. A notification. Claire had viewed the cafe's social media page. Then another. She viewed it again. I opened my contacts. Her name still sat there. One last reminder of the man I used to be. My finger rested on the screen. Delete contact? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Her name disappeared. The room felt strangely lighter. When I walked back outside, movement across the street caught my attention. A familiar gray coat. Claire. She stood on the opposite sidewalk, staring through my cafe window. She didn't wave. She didn't come inside. She simply watched me. as if she no longer recognized the man smiling behind the counter. The bell above the cafe door rang. I was steaming milk for a customer when the familiar sound of slow footsteps reached me. Without thinking, I glanced toward the entrance. Claire. She stood just inside the doorway, one hand still holding the handle, as if she wasn't sure she should have come in. The morning sunlight fell across her face. She looked exactly as I remembered. Only her eyes had changed. They carried something heavy now. I finished pouring the coffee before giving her my attention. The customer smiled after taking the first sip. This is the best latte I've had all month. Thank you. Hope to see you again. The customer waved goodbye. Only then did I face Claire. Good morning. Her lips parted for a second. You work here. A small laugh escaped me. I own it. She blinked. I didn't know. Not many people did. Her gaze moved around the cafe. Fresh flowers rested on every table. The walls, once cracked and dull, now carried warm colors. Soft music floated through the room. She took everything in before returning her attention to me. It looks beautiful. Thank you. Nothing more. No questions. No complaints. No anger. That seemed to confuse her. She slowly walked toward the counter. I'll have. She paused, almost smiling. My usual. I remember. The words slipped out naturally. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her purse. So you still remember? I remember every customer's order. A tiny shadow crossed her face. Maybe she understood what I really meant. I prepared the drink exactly the way she liked it. Extra foam, one packet of brown sugar, a light sprinkle of cinnamon. The same cup, the same careful hands. Only the man making it had changed. I placed it gently on the counter. There you go. She reached for her wallet. This one's on the house. I can pay. I know. She hesitated. Thank you. Instead of leaving, she carried the cup toward the corner table. The same seat where she used to wait for me after work when we dreamed about opening a cafe together. The chair across from her stayed empty. She looked at it several times before lowering her eyes to her coffee. Customers continued coming in. Orders filled the morning. My attention stayed on work, not on memories. Around noon, Maya stepped through the kitchen door carrying a tray of fresh pastries. The sweet smell filled the cafe. She noticed Claire almost immediately. Oh. Her eyes briefly met mine. I simply nodded. Maya smiled politely. Fresh blueberry muffins. They smell amazing. They're still warm. She placed the basket beside the register before brushing a little flour from my shoulder. You missed a spot. I always do. Good thing I'm around. We shared a quiet laugh before returning to work. Nothing forced. Nothing planned. Just two people building something together. Across the room, Claire watched the moment in complete silence. She stayed another 20 minutes before leaving. The bell rang again. Then she was gone. The next afternoon, she returned. Then again 2 days later. Always ordering coffee. Always choosing the same table. Always staying longer than necessary. She never interrupted my work. Never created a scene. She simply watched the cafe come alive. One rainy evening, business slowed. Only 3 customers remained. Claire approached the counter with her empty cup. You've been busy. We're grateful. You built all this. Not alone. I nodded toward the kitchen. Maya believed in the idea before I did. A quiet smile appeared. She seems kind. She is. Another pause settled between us. You look different. So do you. She glanced down at herself. My clothes? No. I rested both hands on the counter. You look tired. Her smile disappeared. The truth rarely needed a loud voice. She accepted it with a slow breath. Work has been stressful. I hope things get better. She searched my face. That's all. What do you mean? I expected you to. Her sentence faded. Be angry? She didn't answer. I was. The words came calmly. For a long time. And now? I have customers waiting. A young couple entered through the front door. I welcomed them with the same smile I had offered everyone else. By the time I looked back, Claire had quietly returned to her table. Days passed. The visits continued. One afternoon, I stepped outside during my break. Across the street stood a black luxury car. Ryan leaned against it, scrolling through his phone. Claire climbed into the passenger seat. Before closing the door, she noticed me. Our eyes met. Ryan didn't even glance in my direction. His voice carried through the open window. "You're late." "There was traffic. I've been waiting 10 minutes. "I'm sorry. Hurry up." The door shut. The car pulled away. Something about that conversation stayed with me. Not because I was jealous, because I recognized that careful voice. The one people use when they're trying not to make someone angry. A week later, she came in again. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. "You okay?" She gave a quick nod. "Just tired." Her phone buzzed. Ryan. His name lit up the screen. She answered almost immediately. "I'll be there soon." Even from where I stood, I could hear his raised voice. "You stopped for coffee again?" "I'm leaving now. I told you I don't like waiting." "I know. Hurry." The call ended. Claire stared at the blank screen for several seconds, then quietly slipped the phone back into her purse. "I'm sorry. You don't need to explain." A weak smile appeared. "I guess I wanted to." She left without finishing her drink. That evening, while closing the cafe, I reached into my wallet for some cash. A small photo slipped onto the counter. Claire and me, standing in front of the old cafe. Both of us laughing. Both believing love alone could survive anything. I picked it up, studied it for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "Thank you." The words weren't for her. They were for the man in that picture. The one who had loved with everything he had. I folded the photo once, then placed it in the trash. The wallet felt lighter in my pocket. The next morning, Maya arrived carrying a fresh bouquet of white flowers. A cafe should always smell like coffee. She arranged them carefully, and something worth coming back to. They're beautiful. They'll make people smile. Customers noticed them almost immediately. So did Claire. She touched one of the flowers gently. "Maya brings these every day. Every morning. She doesn't have to." "I know. Then why does she?" I smiled while wiping the counter. "Because she wants to." Claire nodded slowly. There wasn't envy in her expression anymore. Only realization. She finally understood the difference between someone who stayed because life was easy and someone who stayed because they believed in you. That afternoon, the rain started without warning. People hurried inside to escape the storm. Claire stood near the entrance, holding a folded envelope. She walked to the counter. Didn't speak. Didn't interrupt. She simply placed the handwritten letter beside the register. Her fingers lingered on it for one brief moment. Then she turned and walked back into the rain. The bell above the door gave one soft ring. By the time I reached the window, she was already disappearing through the gray curtain of falling rain. The unopened letter remained on the counter between us, carrying words she could not bring herself to say aloud. The letter stayed unopened until the cafe closed. I carried it into my small office, locked the door, and placed it on the desk. Rain tapped softly against the window. My fingers rested on the envelope for a long moment before I finally unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Every curve of every letter reminded me of birthday cards, grocery lists, and little notes she used to leave inside my lunch bag. Only this time, there was no happiness waiting inside. "Ethan, I don't expect forgiveness." That first sentence already felt heavier than the paper itself. I kept reading. She wrote about growing up in a family where appearances mattered more than honesty. Every dinner became a competition. Every achievement became another expectation. Failure wasn't something to overcome. Failure was something to hide. Then came the part she had never admitted. "When you lost your job, I became terrified. Not because I stopped loving you, because I believed losing everything would become my life too." My eyes stayed on those words. Fear. Not hatred. Not betrayal planned months in advance. Fear mixed with pride. She confessed that Ryan looked like safety. An expensive suit. A successful career. The kind of future her parents had always wanted her to choose. I convinced myself I was making the smart decision. Then, every day after I left, I realized I had chosen comfort over loyalty. The final lines were shorter. "You believed in me when I doubted myself. I should have believed in you when the world stopped believing. I'm sorry for discovering the difference too late." The room became very quiet. Not because the letter fixed anything, Because it finally explained what my heart had been asking for months. Why? I folded the paper carefully, then placed it inside the drawer instead of throwing it away. Some truths deserve to be remembered, even painful ones. The next morning, Maya walked into the cafe carrying a folder. Ready? I smiled. Depends what's inside. She opened it across the counter. Business documents, financial records, a partnership agreement. We've been doing this together for months. She slid a pen toward me. I think it's time the paperwork caught up. You really want this? She laughed. I've been arriving before sunrise every morning. Fair point. My signature looked strangely steady. After everything life had taken from me, I was finally building something that couldn't disappear overnight. Maya signed beneath my name. She extended her hand. Partners. I shook it. Partners. Oliver watched from a nearby table with a proud smile. I knew those old coffee machines still had one more story left. A week later, our cafe was full almost every afternoon. Regular customers brought friends. Families stopped by after school. People laughed, talked, and filled the little room with life. Sometimes I stood behind the counter for a second just to take it all in. This place no longer existed only in my notebook. It was real. Late one afternoon, the television mounted above the cafe counter switched to a breaking news report. Customers slowly grew quiet. A reporter stood outside a large office building. Authorities are investigating financial misconduct involving Executive Ryan Holloway. My hand stopped wiping the counter. The screen showed people carrying boxes out of the building. More headlines appeared. Fraud investigation. Frozen accounts. Investor complaints. The smiling man from that photo months ago suddenly looked frightened. Oliver lowered the television volume. No wonder. You knew something? I heard rumors. He folded his newspaper. People who chase money too hard usually leave broken things behind. That evening, another customer entered carrying fresh gossip. Did you hear? I nodded toward the television. The whole city has. They're saying his company lied to investors. Another customer joined in, and his girlfriend was at the company gala yesterday. My hands kept preparing coffee. I didn't add a single word. Life had already started writing its own ending. 2 days later, Sophia walked into the cafe. I recognized Claire's older sister immediately. She smiled politely. Mind if I sit? Of course. She wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup. I came because Claire won't. I waited. She's embarrassed. I imagine she has a lot on her mind. Sophia nodded. Our parents blamed her for everything. A tired sigh escaped her. They loved Ryan until the headlines appeared. I figured. They've already moved on to finding someone else they approve of. I couldn't hide the sadness in my expression. That's exhausting. It always has been. She leaned forward slightly. She finally understands something. What? You loved her without asking her to become someone else. Those words stayed between us. Sophia stood. I don't expect you to fix her mistakes. I'm not trying to. I know. Before leaving, she smiled gently. Just don't let her carry a lie. What lie? That you stopped loving because you were weak. The bell above the door rang softly as she left. A few evenings later, I walked home after closing the cafe. A jewelry shop was shutting its lights off. One display window caught my attention. A simple wedding ring rested alone on dark velvet. A small tag beneath it read, Pawned. For sale. I stood there longer than I expected. Claire and I used to stop outside jewelry stores, joking about how we'd someday buy matching rings. Now another man's forgotten promise sat behind the glass. I smiled sadly, not because I wanted that future back, because I finally accepted it belonged to another version of me. When I returned to the cafe the next morning, Claire was already waiting outside. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, emotionally. The confidence she once carried had quietly disappeared. She stepped inside after I unlocked the door. I'll only stay a minute. You can sit. She remained standing. I read the news. So did everyone. She nodded slowly. I deserved the whispers. I stayed silent. They're right. Her hands trembled slightly around the strap of her bag. I left because I thought success would protect me. A slow breath escaped her. Instead, I lost the only person who made me feel safe. No dramatic tears followed. No desperate promises. Only honesty. I don't expect another chance. She looked around the cafe. Customers laughed at nearby tables. Fresh flowers brightened every corner. The place felt warm. Alive. I'm happy you built this. Thank you. I almost destroyed the man who dreamed about it. You didn't. Her eyes lifted. I nearly did. I rested both hands on the counter. You left. A quiet pause settled between us. But I chose what happened after. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. When they opened again, they carried acceptance instead of hope. I'm glad you found yourself. She turned toward the door. One hand rested on the handle. Without facing me, she spoke one final sentence. Is there any version of our story that still has me in it? The question lingered in the morning air. My lips parted. No answer came. Not because I didn't hear her. Because some questions deserved more honesty than words could give. She waited only a few seconds. Then she quietly walked away, leaving the door to close behind her while I stood motionless, searching for an answer I wasn't ready to give. Her question followed me for days. Is there any version of our story that still has me in it? I heard those words while opening the cafe every morning. I heard them while washing coffee cups after closing. They stayed with me because they deserved an honest answer. Not a quick one. Life had changed too much for rushed decisions. One quiet evening, Oliver sat near the window with his usual black coffee. You've been thinking? I smiled. Is it that obvious? You've poured sugar into my coffee twice this week. I laughed. Sorry. He took another sip anyway. I've watched people for 30 years. His eyes drifted toward the customers chatting around the room. Some regret losing money. A slow pause followed. The smart ones regret losing themselves. And which one was I? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed toward the counter where Maya was teaching a young employee how to steam milk without burning it. Look around. I did. Laughter filled the room. The smell of fresh bread floated from the kitchen. Every table held people creating memories. You don't need me to answer. He was right. The man who had begged someone to stay was gone. Not because love had disappeared, because self-respect had finally taken its place. A few mornings later, I unlocked the cafe before sunrise. The streets were still quiet. As I turned on the lights, the bell above the door rang softly. Claire stepped inside. She wore a simple blue sweater instead of the expensive clothes I had grown used to seeing. No makeup. No designer handbag. Just Claire. She stopped a few feet from the counter. I came for your answer. I nodded toward the chairs near the window. Let's sit. Neither of us spoke while I prepared 2 cups of coffee. The familiar movements gave me time to settle my thoughts. When I placed 1 cup in front of her, she wrapped both hands around it, almost as if she needed its warmth. I've thought about your question. She gave a small nod. I figured you would. I watched the steam rise between us. You once asked me what I wanted. I remember. I wanted us. A faint smile appeared before fading again. I know. Now I want something different. She waited quietly. I want peace. Those words rested gently between us. Not as a weapon. Not as revenge. Simply as truth. I spent months believing I needed you to come back. My fingers traced the edge of the coffee cup. Then one morning I realized I had already stopped waiting. Her eyes glistened. Not with surprise. With understanding. So, she took a careful breath. There's no way back. I shook my head slowly. Not because I hate you. Another quiet moment passed. But because I finally love myself enough not to return to a place where trust was broken. She lowered her eyes. I understand. No argument followed. No desperate promises. No dramatic goodbye. Only acceptance. I'll always regret leaving. I believe you. And I'm glad you found happiness. A small smile reached my face. It wasn't easy. I know. She reached into her pocket and placed 1 small object on the table. The apartment key. I should have returned it sooner. I picked it up. The cold metal felt much lighter than it had months ago. Thank you. She stood. So this is goodbye. I looked out the window for a second before meeting her eyes again. I think we already said goodbye a long time ago. This time we simply understood it. She smiled through tears that never fell. I hope someone loves you the way you deserved all along. I hope you learn to love yourself enough not to choose fear again. She nodded once, then quietly walked toward the door. Just before leaving, she looked back, not expecting me to stop her, only remembering. The morning sunlight followed her outside. She never returned. Months slipped by. Spring became summer. The little cafe turned into one of the busiest places in the neighborhood. Customers often waited outside before opening. Children waved through the windows. Older couples stayed for hours, sharing stories over fresh coffee. The dream I once carried inside a notebook now surrounded me every day. One afternoon, Maya joined me after closing. She carried 2 slices of pie from the kitchen. Quality control. I laughed. Convenient excuse. She sat across from me. So, you've been smiling more. Have I? Much more. She slid one plate toward me. I'm glad. Me too. The conversation drifted toward recipes, suppliers, and plans for expanding the bakery section. It felt easy, comfortable. Neither of us tried to force something into existence. Whatever waited ahead would arrive in its own time. And somehow, that felt even more beautiful. Later that evening, I returned to my apartment. The empty suitcase still rested on top of the closet. The same suitcase Claire had packed on the night she left. I carried it downstairs, opened it. Nothing remained inside. No forgotten sweater. No old photographs. No memories waiting to surprise me. I placed it in the storage room, then quietly closed the door. Some things belonged in the past, not because they had no value, because they had already taught me everything they needed to. While cleaning my phone, I noticed one final unread message. It had been sitting there for months. Claire's last text. Never opened. Never answered. I stared at the screen. This wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't punishment. The message simply belonged to a chapter that had already ended. My thumb rested on it. Delete. The screen cleared. No dramatic feeling followed. Only calm. The next morning, the cafe opened as usual. Fresh coffee filled the air. Maya arranged flowers near the entrance. Oliver argued playfully with a regular customer about baseball. Laughter bounced off the walls. I stepped outside for a moment. The cafe's sign glowed warmly beneath the setting sun. Carter and Brooks Cafe. People smiled as they walked through the door. Not because of me alone, because this place had become part of their lives. As the evening ended, I served one final cup of coffee to a tired nurse finishing a long shift. She took one sip and smiled. I really needed this today. So did I. She left with a grateful wave. I switched off the lights one by one. The chairs rested neatly on the tables. The flowers still looked fresh. Everything felt peaceful. Before leaving, I took one last slow look around the room. This cafe had given me far more than a career. It had given me back the man I thought I had lost. I locked the front door. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered in the cool evening air. Walking toward home, I finally understood something that had taken me far too long to learn. Sometimes the happiest ending begins the moment someone walks out of your life. The door closed behind me, not on love itself, but on the version of me that believed I had to earn it.